Hi everyone, my name is Drew Tepper. I'm a PharmD intern graduating this year, and I work for Tepper and Rabin Consultants. And I'm going to talk to you about COVID-19 and specifically putting on personal protective equipment appropriately. There will be videos coming after this, and we have other videos about the basics of COVID. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. So, an overview. Again, it's an overview. We'll go into depth moving forward on other slides. But to put on the PPE, which is also known as donning, if you hear it called that in some other literature, you want to locate the proper gear. You want to perform proper hand hygiene, which remember by washing hands, which remember is 20 seconds or more of using soap and water, or you can use hand sanitizer. But again, the washing hands with soap and water is very much preferred right now. Then you want to put on your isolation gown. You want to put on your respirator or face mask. Then you want to wash your hands again using hand sanitizer or by washing hands. And then you want to put on your gloves. So it is safe, after doing this, it's safe to enter the patient room. All of these all of these recommendations come straight from the CDC. There's a handout that has all of these same diagrams and all of these same instructions. And if you need extra copies of it, please let us know. So to take off, the order of taking off the personal protective equipment, otherwise known as doffing, you want to remove the gloves and the gown first. We'll talk about the specifics a little bit later. You want to exit the patient room, and then you want to perform proper hand hygiene, wash your hands, again, 20 seconds or more. Remove the N95 respirator or face mask, and you want to discard that. Just remember a couple key points here: that you exit the patient room after removing the gown and the gloves. This may be facility dependent, so follow up with your nursing supervisor with what is the best way to dispose of your gloves and your gown, and where to do it, whether it's in the patient room or right outside the patient room. But the important thing is that you immediately discard of this equipment, because it will be assumed to be quote unquote contaminated, whether or not it is literally contaminated after you're working with a patient. You want to, at the very end, wash your hands again or use hand sanitizer before you go do any other tasks in the nursing home. So this is what it should look like. This is two versions. On the left here, we have they're the same except for the mask, right? So there's like an N95 respirator, and then if that's not available, or if it doesn't dictate, the situation doesn't dictate that you need to use an N95 or it's lower risk, you may use a face mask, and the CDC says that these are interchangeable, although the N95 is preferred in extreme, situations. Different facilities are different, so and different situations are different. So the necessity of a face shield or goggles is under debate right now. So you may or may not wear a face shield or goggles for different situations. but it's important to know what it looks like, or know it, to prepare for all possibilities. Again, you want to have a pair of clean, sterile gloves put on properly and taken off properly. And this is your isolation gown, most likely with a tie on it. So the sequence is important for putting on your PPE. You want to put the gown on first. Remember that, once you take it, whether it's out of the bag or out of its storage, and it is on you, the the front of the gown is what's really going to be, obviously facing the patient, and that is the part that once it's on, you kind of assume that it is a vulnerable area, so you don't want to kind of jeopardize that part of the gown, or the front of you after you put it on. This should all be kind of one fluid motion of putting on all these parts in order, and one after another. So anyway, you put on the gown, then the mask, or the respirator. The goggles or face shield would come next, if necessary, and then gloves are last, right? Because you're touching everything, and then you want to cover your hands with those gloves. Now, once your gloves are on, right, you are completely covered, right, by this equipment. So, it's very, very important at this point to not touch anything, right? You don't want to touch anything outside of the room. If you're outside of the room or even inside of the room, that's unnecessary, because anything that you touch could be covered in, or have particles, viral particles, or definitely other particles that then you would spread throughout the room that you're trying to protect. And also, the more you do things like that, the more you endanger yourself to, touch your own face by accident later, after touching the contaminated parts of the room. So, you want to keep your hands away from your face. You want to limit, as I said, the surfaces that are touched. You want to change gloves. So if your gloves get torn, you want to immediately, walk out, or as reasonably as possible, for the safety of the patient. You want to walk out of the room, and grab a new pair of gloves, and make sure to perform hand hygiene when necessary. So if your hands become, contaminated with anything, you want to wash your hands and then put on a change of gloves. So how do we put on the PPE properly? So as we said, the gown comes first. Fully cover your torso, from neck to knees, your arms to the end of the wrist, and wrap around to the back, and fasten it, tie a knot in the back. Again, as I said, I know, it's repetition, but it's super important that this front area is, considered contaminated, or vulnerable, maybe is a better word to use, once it's on you. So you don't want to lean up against anything. You don't want to, really have contact with anything else. Again, like I said, one fluid motion, putting it on. So for the mask or the respirator, you want to make sure it's a secure and tight fit as much as possible, whichever one you're using. Because remember, if you sneeze, or even if as you're breathing, particles are coming in and out through the little gaps, through the top and through the bottom, if there are, gaps. So you want it to be snug to the face and below the chin. And if possible, or if your home dictates, I should say, you may have what's called a fit check to make sure that everything's fitting, snug. Um, Again, this is uh, nursing home or facility dependent. As far as the goggles or the face shield, again, tight and snug. Maybe that's the tagline for this. Um, make sure everything is as sealed as possible before or as you're entering the room. Um, and then the gloves, you want to put on last and extend to cover the wrist of the isolation gown. So I realize this seems like a small point, but it really isn't. Um, so what this does is it creates a tight seal, right? If you're overlapping with the gown, what you're doing is if there's a gap here, you're gonna have air circulating under the glove or on the glove, and that's gonna cause problems later when or it's gonna cause problems then, but it'll cause even more problems later when you personally try to take off the equipment because then you'll be contaminating yourself uh, afterwards. Um, so you want to overlap the gloves with the gown, and you want it on as make sure there are no tears or rips in the gloves. And once these are on, you should be either in the room or headed into the room without any other tasks really to do. So, how to remove the PPE safely. Um, so we're gonna go through this in pictures, but the gown front sleeves and the outside of the gloves are considered a version of contaminated, even if they're not literally contaminated. Again, because they've been in contact with the patient, and in a way, I think the safest way, and there are different ways of thinking about this, but the safest way to think about it is to um, think that you've interacted with the patient, and the patient has therefore the room has put kind of viral particles or different things on your gown or on your mask or etc. So when you're taking them off, you want to make sure to isolate each piece in a very strategic way to make sure that you're not touching them and then uh, spreading it throughout your body, which would then is not safe. So you want to grasp the gown in the front, pull away from your body so that the ties break. So this is one technique. The gown has multiple techniques. This is the one that the CDC mentions, which is totally fine. But make sure the most important part of this is to touch the outside of the gown only with the gloved hands. So your gloved hands are still properly kind of protecting your hands, right? And so you can use that after the fact to pull on the other part that is quote unquote contaminated, the gown, and pull it off. While removing the gown, you want to roll the gown inside out. Remember the inside, so the side facing your body is actually probably the safest part of the gown, right? Because it hasn't been in contact with the rest of the room. So you want to roll the gown from the inside out into like a ball or a little present, as it was taught to me at one point. And as you're removing the gown, peel off your gloves at the same time as one kind of, there's also like one sweeping motion. Only touching the inside of the gloves, again, another safe area, and gown with your bare hands. So your bare hands are the thing you're trying to protect, right? And the rest of your person, right? Place gown and gloves inside of a waste container. So here's an example. of how to do it, right? So you don't, it says here uh, to grasp the gown in the front and pull away so that the ties break. That's fine. You know, but you can. The important part I want you to take away is to really carefully and strategically pull the gown away from your body forward, so only in one direction. Uh, like, from if your body forms a straight line out from it, you want to do it that way, and then roll it from so that this is the inside that was facing your body before, this white uh, um, part in the image, and to roll that as the new outside. And when you finish, you won't have any gloves on because they will be in this little package. And you only want to be touching with your bare hands this part because this side is safe. If you're wearing goggles or a face shield, again, touch as little as possible. The outside is contaminated. Now, the back where they're held on or tied on is safer, right? And that you have to touch something. So if your hands, or I'm sorry, so you want to remove the goggles or face shield from the back of your head, or by lifting the headband without touching the front of the goggles or the face shield. Imagine that all the breathing or coughing might have gotten particles onto you. If it's reusable, follow your facility policy, or obviously if you're to discard it, then discard it in a waste container. For all these, if you get contaminated during whatever you're doing, make sure to wash your hands and use alcohol-based use alcohol-based hand sanitizer. So again, if this is for the mask, it's just another picture. So pulling off from the back, dropping into the bin, and here again, ripping or pulling off or untying from the back. You want to grasp with the bottom ties, elastics of the mask or respirator, then the ones at the top, and remove without touching of the front. Right, so that's the key takeaway. Discard in a waste container, again, as you need to. Then, so now you have your gown off, right? Your gloves are off, your goggles or your mask, or your goggles or your face mask, face shield are off, and then your respirator is off as well. So you want to then go wash your hands using, you want to wash your hands for 20 seconds or more with soap and water, and then, or use hand sanitizer immediately after you remove everything. Again, be very liberal with washing your hands. It's one of the best ways we have to protect ourselves and each other from spreading anything. And these steps are super important to do in this order, and to do without compromising any of the equipment, especially once it's on you. You don't want to walk into a patient's room after leaning over something, and touching other parts of the facility. You really want to, once you decide to go into a patient's room and you're putting this all on, you're putting it on, you go in, and then you come out after you're done. All right, so that's it for this video. There will be follow-up videos, as I mentioned, to go into more depth. Thank you.